Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Courtside with Beilinson Tennis, part of the Tennis Channel Podcast Network. Here, as always, with my co-host, Steve Flink, Hall of Famer. We got some interesting things to talk about in the round robin stage, and then obviously we'll talk more about semis and finals. But before we get rolling, I guess, what more can you say? Novak.
Yeah, spectacular end of the year. To come take all that time off after the U.S. Open, David, and then go to Paris and struggle through three long, tough three setters and win that title over Dimitrov, and then another less than a week, basically a week off, goes to Turin and with a goal of being number one in the world to end the year at number one. And he did that by winning his first match, and then to take the title to boot and to play his best tennis in the last two matches. He could not have asked for more.
And, some players need a lot of tournaments, a lot of matches up to whatever their goal is, the next slam or the next big tournament. Novak did the same thing with the U.S. Open. He played one warm-up for him. We all remember that unbelievable final versus Carlos. He knows exactly what he needs to do at this stage of his career. And it's mind-boggling to any sports fan. I just won't even say any tennis fan at this point.
No, it is. It reminds me a bit of Rafa, too. Rafa, as he got older, realized he didn't need as many tournaments, and he could come back strong after layoffs. And it's something he wouldn't have believed in earlier in his career, and he succeeded often that way. And Novak this year, the way he scheduled himself, 12 tournaments, David. He played 12 tournaments the entire year, still finishes far ahead of Carlos for number one, gets his seventh year-end number one ranking. And of the 12 tournaments, he wins 7 of them.
What does that say, right? That means he plays the big ones and he wins them. That's how you end number one in the world by such a wide margin.
Yeah, and you do it by winning 3 of the 4 slams, getting to the final of the other one, winning a couple of Masters 1000s in Cincinnati and Paris, and then winning the year-end championships. That's why
he's efficient, Steve. He's pretty efficient.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, he knows he's had years where he played much more, like 2015, and won much more. In 2011, too, when he won 3 of the 4 slams and just was unbeatable until after the Open. And so he's had years like that where he definitely put himself on the line more and was more prolific. But he's never been more opportunistic and never been more efficient than he was this year.
100% agree. 100% agree. All right, let's start with the round robin. And, Carlos Alcaraz, right? People have said, okay, post Wimbledon, it hasn't been that great. He's still done plenty well. Again, he's still learning. The length of this season is crazy, especially for a guy like Carlos, who is playing in the latter stages of most of the tournaments that he enters. I'm not worried about him. Carlos and his team will figure it out. He loses in the round robin stage, has not been as sharp he may have been, obviously, when he was playing the Wimbledon fortnight, but still, he's so young and his team's going to figure it out. He does get to the semis. We'll get to that in a minute. Then you also had Novak playing Sinner the first time, loses in a great match, 7-6 in the third. Sinner wins 7-2 in the breaker. That's something rare that we normally don't see with Novak and tiebreakers. 1, for Novak to lose a tiebreaker, and 2, to lose at 7-2. But Sinner was awesome in that match.
Dave, I should add, it was a weird week that way because he also lost another one to Rune 7-1.
Yeah.
So he had a couple of surprisingly poor tiebreaks, but look, he was playing his way into form. That's the whole point. In the round robin, he was never at the level he was over the weekend in the round robin play. But when it really mattered, when we got down to single elimination, and do or die, that's when he produced.
And Sinner was magnificent in that match. We got to give
Sinner. It was magnificent. He was. It was an interesting match because in that one, David, it was a 7-5 first set where Novak had a little opening with Sinner serving at 4-5, 15-30, and he missed what for him was he hit a slice backhand long. It was a surprising choice. And then 5-all first set, he had 40 love, and Sinner came back to break him. That got Sinner the first set. Novak comes back and wins the second in a tiebreak. And when he got it to a third set tiebreak, I think all the money was on him. And that was a spectacular tiebreak that Sinner played to win the 7-2 one that you mentioned. Novak didn't do much wrong in that breaker, but Sinner stepped up sublimely to win that match. Great performance.
I agree. So now Thursday becomes an interesting predicament. And look, I've never been at the even close to the level of what these guys are at. So, right, they have this elite mindset. I can't get into their brains. I wish I could. But Thursday was interesting, right? Because Sinner's playing Holger Rune, right? If Sinner loses that match, Novak doesn't make the weekend. This is crazy. He does.
Yeah,
Right.
Yes, absolutely. Part of the reason was that Novak dropped the middle set of his last round robin match against Hubie Hurkacz, who was a replacement for Tsitsipas. That set made a big difference. That's why he put himself in that position. And so there was, as you know, a lot of speculation. Is Sinner, he doesn't need this. He's already qualified for the semis. And does he really want to give Novak a second chance against him personally, which potentially could happen on Sunday, and did. But to his great credit, he battled hard. He won the first set easily against Rune 6-2, lost the second, seemed to be having an ailing back, played hard in the third, but he was down 3-4 break point, and he hit a body serve that managed to get Rune to hit a backhand down the line, return wide, and then Sinner ran out the match from there. That was very professional and very impressive that he gave it an all-out effort.
And we were talking about this during the week. You also had an interesting point as well. This match was on a Thursday. So
yeah.
even so, whether Sinner wins or loses, he would have a day off, right? He would have Friday. Right. Still, do you want Novak there in the weekend or not? But that being said, right, he still have a day off, even if it was a really long physical battle with Rune. You felt because of that extra day off that Sinner would have, he would not tank the match.
No, but also, yes, exactly that. And the fact that he's a really conscientious, decent, good guy. And I just don't see him sitting down with Darren Cahill and saying, should I let this match go, Darren? Because that way I would never have to worry about Novak again this week. I just don't think his mind works that way, nor do I think Cahill would want him to do that. And by the way, another point to be made here is that Medvedev had qualified when he played Carlos on Friday. Medvedev knew he was in the semis. Carlos needed this win to get to the semis and beat Medvedev in straight. And, yes, you could say that maybe Medvedev didn't look 100% fired up, but he tried hard. He played decently, and he got outplayed.
And the difference there was he didn't have a day off.
Yeah, no day off. It's true. But I'm saying I think he gave it a full effort too. Yeah. But the downside when you do that, and I remember this happened once to Pete Sampras when he lost to Wayne Ferrer in a round-robin match back in '95 and then lost the next day to Chang in the semis. Sometimes it kind of lingers with you. It's not a great feeling, as Medvedev even said after he lost to Carlos. You don't really want to come in there to the semis with a loss, but you try to put it behind you. So there's all these things swirling around their minds, but it made for a fascinating week.
Well, Novak owes Sinner a very large Christmas present. I think we can agree with that. I mean, Sinner was totally in control of Novak show, was there in the weekend or not. But no, I agree.
Sinner also, it was an impressive week because he had opened up with a win over Tsitsipas, who had his physical issues, granted, but still a good start, beats Novak, hangs on to beat Rune, and then beats Medvedev for the third straight time this fall. So he'd had a great week to go 4-0 coming into the finals, but obviously to beat Novak Djokovic twice in a week, and he knew that Novak was going to be primed for him on Sunday if they met, that he was going to have to even surpass the effort that he'd made in the round robin, which was a gigantic performance.
This was, again, this is pure speculation on my front because, again, I can't get into these unbelievable elite players' minds, but they're built differently, right? They didn't get to where they are, Steve, by taking the easy way out in anything. And, if you say an athlete of, an elite athlete goes and has thinking about maybe tanking a match, I just don't think that registers with these players.
No, it doesn't. But the unfortunate thing is, David, I love this tournament because we get these matchups. Like we had, for instance, a terrific battle, Carlos's first match, and Zverev beat him in 3 sets. It was one of the more entertaining matches of the entire week. And you get the Novak match against Sinner, and you just get these matchups.
Oh, it's the best. Top 8 players
another. But it's unfortunate when it comes down to those last round robin matches, and sometimes somebody's already in and they don't need the win as much as their opponent needs it. And that's the only drawback of the round robin, is it puts the players sometimes in a position where they might think about those things. But I agree with you. And there was no question about what Sinner did against Rune. And I honestly don't think anybody could question Medvedev's effort against Carlos. He just got outplayed in that match.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you. Okay, so here we are, semis. We have the top 4 players in the world advanced to make the semis. 2 unbelievable matchups, right? With Carlos versus Novak in a semi this time, not a final, and Sinner versus Medvedev. The Alcaraz Novak match, and I'll let you, kind of obviously go through it, but the first set, the very first game, Carlos had 2 break points, didn't convert, and I think that kind of set the tone of how that first set may have went on. And I'll let you go from there.
Yeah, it was an important game, and you could see Goran Ivanisevic and also Novak's hitting partner. The two of them were sitting there looking very nervous. The last thing you want is for him to go right out and lose his serve. And Carlos hit a couple of spectacular winners to get to 15-40. It wasn't that Novak did anything wrong, but then he really was good under pressure. Came up with some great serving, Novak, and some clutch play. And then again at 2-2, he had a couple of deuces on his serve. It was a nerve-wracking game on his serve, but he got through it. No break points, but a couple of deuces. And then sure enough, he serves his way out to 4-3 and then pounces on Carlos in the next game. And Carlos sprayed a few balls long off his backhand. He missed a backhand down the line on the break point, and Novak just served it out at love, and then turned up that talent level another notch or two in the second set.
Yeah, before we get to that second set, it was an interesting stat. Carlos served 82%. Yeah. First serve percentage in the first set and lost. And now you can say, oh, David and Steve can serve 82% against Novak, but we're not spinning it in like Carlos is, right? Carlos is going for a lot of big first serves.
Yeah, he was.
And 82% and he loses it.
Well, how about 84% for the match?
Yeah.
And he gets broken 2 more times in the second set. So it's like, that was remarkable. And he was serving a lot of aces. I think he ended up with 10. He had some good service games, but Novak was pressuring him throughout the match, as he did similar pattern to the final, what he did against Sinner, because in the round robin match against Sinner, he only broke 1 time, but today he got 3 breaks and was threatening so many other times. But
yeah, I want to walk through that second set a little bit with Novak and Carlos, because it got really, really good there for a short period of time. Novak breaks Carlos at 1-1 to go 2-1. And then Novak has another break point to go up 3-1. Didn't convert. And that's when I said to you, I said, okay, let's see, right? We see that pattern a lot of times, right? Novak has break points, doesn't convert. Now that player then immediately gets broken, and it almost happened. Novak serving at 3-2 goes down 15-40. Unbelievable points. The 3-2 game and the 4-2 game were, to me, stratospheric in how we have seen these 2 players compete against each other. Just in this match, it was just those 2 games. We've seen them compete at that crazy, unbelievable stratospheric level for more than just 2 games. And boy, those 2 games were entertaining.
They were, and that was Carlos just desperately trying to work his way back into the match. And when he got to 15-40, he played a couple of magnificent points to get there, and Novak was pushing him corner to corner, and Carlos is defending, and as probably only he, not as only he can do, but as only he and a few others can do. He can come off the defense and then suddenly just bury you with a winner, and up go the arms and up goes his confidence. But the way Djokovic served his way out of it from 15-40 was magnificent, particularly the 30-40 point when he hit a forehand pass cross court. And Carlos really thought he had him cold in that rally. And Novak, that was a pivotal moment in the match. And then he managed to serve his way to 4-2 and got the insurance break in the great 7th game that you mentioned too, which was, again, Djokovic at his best in terms of offense and defense. And he gets the insurance break and then serves it out easily for 6-2. But it was an important win, David, in the sense that if you look at the Alcaraz-Djokovic rivalry, it started on the clay over in Spain last year, 7-6 in the third for Carlos. Very first time they ever played. And then we go to this year, and we have the French Open where they had 2 fantastic sets before Djokovic pulled away after Carlos cramped. But the second set was so tight, and Carlos won at 7-5, and we saw what was possible. And then the Wimbledon 5-set final round win for Carlos. And then Cincinnati, the epic 3-setter, 3 hours, 49 minutes. Djokovic from match point down wins in the second set, wins it in a tiebreaker in the third. So it seemed like every time they played was so tight and so hard fought. And as Djokovic said after this match, everybody was kind of expecting another one of those, that it would go down to the wire again. And that would have potentially been a big problem for Djokovic, even if he'd won. If he had had another, say, 3.5 hours scrape with Carlos the day before the finals, no day off. But he played one of his best matches of the year, as he did again in the final. It's hard to sort of compare the two, but they both were top of the line Djokovic performances to close out his tour season. And that was important, that he finally had a win over Carlos that wasn't like right down to the wire, hanging in the balance. That and to the point where Carlos said he didn't think he was on the same level as Novak. He didn't even say indoors. You feel that that's what he was implying. Yeah. But he didn't say it that way. He just said, I have to look at this. I don't even think about Wimbledon or Cincinnati now. I have to look at this because I was not on his level, which was quite an admission from Carlos. And Nick Kyrgios on the television was talking about that and saying if he saw Carlos, he'd remind him, look, you beat him in the Wimbledon final. You're on his level. But
yeah, indoors is... Go ahead.
It shows you what that shellacking did, the one-sidedness of the defeat, how that, and Carlos tries to be honest with himself. It's a side of him that I like, where it's like, look, I have to look at this realistically. He just took me apart, and I have to figure out why. So part of it, David, a couple of quick things to tack onto that. He recovered from the Zverev loss. Carlos did. He beat Rublev in straight, played nicely against Medvedev to avenge the U.S. Open loss and beat him in straight. And a lot of people, I think, maybe got extra excited because he beat Medvedev and think, okay, here we go. But then Novak brought him back down to earth again, because at this point, maybe this is the worst. Carlos indoors on a fast court, maybe that's his least favorite setting. Plus, he hadn't won a tournament since Wimbledon, so the whole second half of the year had not been going his way. If he'd been able to beat Novak and even just make the final, it would have been a big lift. But the second set was kind of a little bit of a downward spiral, nothing disastrous. He got to the semis of the U.S. Open. He lost that epic to Novak in Cincinnati, and he gets to the semis here too. But it was not the same Carlos that we saw across the first half of the season.
Agreed. Again, like I said, kind of at the outset, I think he'll figure that out. He'll get used to his body. It's a long, long season, and him and his team will figure that stuff out.
Oh,
I still, in this current environment, Steve, when Carlos and Novak raise their games together at the same time, only those two in this current environment can play a level of tennis like they did for those 2 games yesterday. I mean, we've seen it, and obviously a lot longer than just 2 games, but when they are both pushing each other, I've never seen any tennis like that in my whole life.
I agree with you. There's no doubt about it. He just wasn't able to do it for a whole match this time. Just those few games, as you mentioned, and I shouldn't just say just those few games. The first half of the first set, we forget, Novak was the one struggling more, starting with the 2 break points in the first game, and then another tough game on his serve at 2 also. It wasn't until he made his move and broke Carlos for a 5-3 lead, then he took over. But I agree with you. And those points, there was one of those great points when Novak was trying to make sure to hold on for 4-2. He looked over at his camp, because he totally outmaneuvered Carlos and somehow lost the point. And he looked at them as if to say, what more was I supposed to do? I hit every shot I wanted to. How in the world did I lose that point? It was a great close-up.
Yeah, I think Courier or Brett Haver said the same thing. It's incredible once they really start pushing each other. All right, the other semi is Sinner and Medvedev. It goes 3 sets. Sinner gets the early break. Insurance breaks 6-1. The interesting fact to me in the head-to-head when you look at these two now, Steve, Sinner, I believe, was 0-6 versus Medvedev. Now it's 3-6. He's won the last 3 matches.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. And a couple of finals this fall, and Medvedev was talking about it leading into the match about how he felt he'd done better in Vienna than he had the previous time, but he still needed to do better than that. And he imploded a bit. Daniel did. He had a little issue with his hip. Apparently, went and saw the physio after the second set, but it was a nice recovery after the first set, which was a little bit of a strange set because there were a couple of games. There was one game where Sinner served at 1-1, and he had 40-love lead and almost lost the game. He had to save himself from break point. Then Daniel had 40-love and did lose his serve. And then Daniel had another love 30 opportunity. He didn't take that. So it was a strange first set, but Sinner just played the big points better. Great second set serving from Medvedev throughout and a very good tiebreak. And you thought we're going to have a really close third set, but Sinner just ran away with that third set. And part of the problem was that Medvedev was kind of incensed with the audience. And in particular, one fan, he started to sort of get into it with the fan after throwing his racket into the side of the fence. And you worried a bit about him there, that he was becoming a little unhinged, but he settled back down and played okay the rest of the way, but Sinner was too good. So interesting season for Medvedev too, David, in the sense that he had that great early season, all that run from Rotterdam right through Rome when he was taking all those titles. And then he didn't win any more the rest of the year. He had some good results, semis of Wimbledon, finals of the US Open, couple of finals to dinner, semis here. Very good, consistent results, but a little frustrating for him in the sense that he wasn't able to secure any more titles.
I mean, again, semis of Wimbledon, finals US Open, including beating Carlos in the semis.
It's nothing to be ashamed of, nothing to be demoralized about. It's just that you measure him up against the very best, meaning Novak, Carlos, and even Sinner now. And Medvedev, he's got some real concerns there, but obviously his standard was consistently high.
Yeah, consistently high. Okay, so we get the final, round 2. Jannik Sinner, Novak Djokovic, first set, 6-3 Novak Djokovic. And this is now, like you said, this was not round robin Novak. This is locked in, focused Novak. I'm winning this damn title.
Well, from the very beginning, David, his serve was just spot on. He ended up with 13 aces, but he lost 2 points on his serve in the first set. He was putting so much pressure on Sinner because he was coasting through his own service games, and he was able actually to keep the points relatively short because he was out hitting Jannik off the forehand. They were showing the numbers there. He was averaging about 85 miles an hour on the forehand. It was up considerably significantly from his a few miles an hour better than usual. And he was beating him to the punch and keeping the points. He wasn't even have to strain himself because you weren't looking at some of the exchanges like he had against Carlos in the middle of the second set.
Right.
Most of these points they weren't going above 8-10 shots. And so it was being played on Novak's terms, and then he got the break he needed, and he served it out. In the first set was very comfortable, and by the time he got to 2-love 30 in the second set to try to break it open, he'd won 14 points in a row.
Yeah, that was some run he had on there. And as a coach, I'm always big on the first game of sets, right? Whether you're up, whether you've won the first set or whether you've lost the previous set. Because if you lose the previous set and you win that first game, you kind of say to your opponent, I'm not going away, right? I'm here.
Yeah.
And vice versa, right? If you've won the first set and you win that first game, it's like, let's keep this train going. And Novak breaks in the first game. I'm like, oh my God, he holds. Then he has 3 break points to go up 3-0, including a sitter forehand down the line that he makes 99% of the time. He doesn't convert. Sinner holds for 2-1. It's still Novak's up a break, but you're like, damn, that insurance break would have been nice at that point.
Yeah, but then in the next game, you're right. And the forehand you mentioned, he had made Sinner play a low backhand volley, and Sinner kind of popped it up. So Novak had the clear opening for the pass down the line. It was kind of unlucky because it clipped the net cord, but it seemed to be heading in.
It was in. It was going to hit. It just hit the tape.
It bounced off the net cord and goes wide into the alley. He couldn't believe that he was shot. That would have been the match. But that's what made it interesting from that point on, is that was the pattern. He was having such a difficult time getting that insurance break. And then Sinner finally got him down 15-40, but Novak
missed 2 returns, Steve, in that game. Sinner missed both return of serves on that to get it to deuce, and Novak winds up.
But they were good serves, good first serves. They weren't easy returns. One of them, the one back-end return he probably could have made. The forehand return was pretty difficult, but that was really the only break points that he had. Those 2 break points were it. So basically, Djokovic went through the weekend, David, beats Alcaraz 3-2, beats Sinner 3-3. He didn't get broken in either match. In addition, Sinner had lost his serve twice all tournament long, and Djokovic broke him 3 times today.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I mean,
There is something though that I still want to talk about, because that 4-2, there was that seventh game then, 16 minutes. Sinner holds 4-3. And again, Novak, that's the second time Novak tried to get that insurance break.
Right.
Doesn't do it. So you're like, okay, if somehow Sinner can break Novak, we can have ourselves a match. He couldn't. Novak holds, and then obviously broke. Finally gets the insurance game, the last game of the match. Double fault. Here's a good stat for you, Steve, that I know you'll like and the listeners will like. And I forgot it, someone put it on Twitter, so I apologize for not crediting the person. But Novak versus Sinner in the round robin, that match took 3 hours and 9 minutes. The Novak semi and final versus Alcaraz and Sinner combined 3 hours and 12 minutes. It took 3 minutes longer to play two matches than the first one against Sinner.
No, remarkable, but it had so much to do with his level. He said something very interesting to Prakash Amritraj leading into this final, and they were talking about the round robin match. And he said, "Look, Sinner played great. I played good. And I thought, okay, he knows he can take it up a level and force, and then what happens? And that really was it. It's not that he by any means had played badly in that round robin match, but today he was easily 25% better.
It's amazing. 98 career titles now, 7th ATP Finals title. He wins 3 slams. He misses a calendar slam. We talked about this earlier. He actually, some could say he was closer to winning the calendar slam this year than he was 2 years ago, because he only missed it by 1 set. Now, again, it was done earlier in the year, so he didn't have the pressure buildup of the US Open, which he had 2 years ago. But he missed the calendar slam by a 5th set at Wimbledon.
Yeah, absolutely. And a 5th set where he had a swing volley to go up 2-love in the 5th set that might have sealed the match for him. But I will say this, in an odd way, I think it helped him. If you look at what he did, I don't mean that he wouldn't have loved to have won the Grand Slam, but then he came to the Open without that same kind of pressure as he did 2 years ago.
That's why it's different.
When he lost to Medvedev in the final, the pressure was building because it was right there on the line. Here he was now just, his head was cleared. He accepted that loss to Carlos. He respects Carlos and he didn't really dwell on it too long. And then what ends up happening to the rest of his year? He wins Cincinnati in the epic over Carlos. He wins the US Open, beating Medvedev in a really well-played final. He wins the Paris Masters 1000, and he wins this. He won his last 4 titles of the year after losing to Carlos in the Wimbledon final. So, I don't think he would trade the way things played out, because he really had a tremendous finish to the season. Even though he didn't play that much, he won on every one of those big occasions.
It's just, I mean, the people who don't watch this on video, again, these are uploaded on YouTube. I'm just shaking my head as we're talking about this, because it's magnificent. And he said, I mean, he's open about it. He wants to break every record there is that out there. I do want to ask you.
And by the way, that is another broken record here at the ATP Finals, because he and Roger had each won 6 titles. So that 7th breaks a record for that tournament as well. And to think of all these tournaments that he's done, to have 10 Australian, 7 Wimbledons, 7 Paris Masters 1000, and 7 ATP Finals.
Yeah. Jimmy Connor's record is the 109. Novak's got his eyes on that, I think. Nick Kyrgios, Steve, I thought it was great that Tennis Channel brought him in and that Nick agreed to do it. I really enjoyed his commentary. He didn't view it as a joke at all. He took it seriously. He provided some great insight. Obviously, Nick has played all these players. He's in a similar generation as these players. So he had some, a really good, insightful analysis that maybe someone who obviously didn't play against these players in the same generation. I thought he was great.
Well, yeah, that's what they took full advantage of. Is his experiences, especially his experiences playing Djokovic. They spent a lot of time talking to him about Djokovic, because he did beat him a couple of times in 2017, which was an off year for Novak, and then they played that Wimbledon final in 2022 that Novak won. And Nick was. I'm sure there were a lot of fans that were pleasantly surprised that he was very congenial in the booth and very generous in his praise of the players. And he did take it seriously. You're right. He just wasn't making cavalier remarks. He was paying attention to what he was watching. And as I've said to you in some of our other conversations, I thought that was Courier was terrific with him, as was Brett Haber, in allowing him plenty of room because they knew he was the newcomer to the booth and he had a lot to say. And Jim was willing at times to take a back seat so that Nick could really express himself. And I thought that was commendable.
100% agree. All right. Well, hey, I know there's still Davis Cup next week, but that really brings us pretty much to the end.
By the way, not only is there Davis Cup, but both Djokovic for Serbia and Sinner for Italy are supposed to be there. What a tough effort that's going to be for them.
The tennis season. Don't get me started, Steve. Don't get me upset on this beautiful Sunday. You know, and it's a crowded field to win slams. Obviously, when you have, well, I shouldn't say it's a crowded field. It's hard to win a slam when you have one guy who wins everything. But you referred to it earlier. Jannik Sinner, tremendous year, and people are saying, you know, this guy's going to win a slam next year, and he very well could. Again, it's just hard to do when you got someone who basically monopolizes all the biggest events when he plays the events, and Novak is obviously going to play all the slams. You got Carlos in there too. It's Carlos 20 and Sinner's 22 years old. These guys are so young, Steve. And I'll get your thoughts when we do our year-end segment, but it's going to be exciting to see. I felt we got the best four, and I know you could say rankings, whatever. I felt these four players in the semifinals of the tennis of the ATP finals are the best four tennis players in the world.
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt. I mean, that was what it was so fitting about it. They all deserved to be in the semis. They'd earned their way, not just at this tournament, but the way they had played across the entire year. So, yeah, it worked out very well that it all came down to Medvedev playing Sinner in one semi, and then surprisingly a Djokovic-Alcaraz semifinal rather than final, which, of course, was true in Roland Garros as well. And then finally, Djokovic avenging the loss to Sinner earlier in the week and winning the final today. So I think the season ended on a very high note.
Yeah, I agree. And it was great. We're going to have our year-end wrap-up. We'll do that in a couple weeks. And I wish you, Steve, and all the listeners and every tennis fan out there a wonderful Thanksgiving. We made it through another year, Steve. You're still doing this with me. I think some people question your sanity, but you're still doing this with me. So I appreciate it from the bottom of my heart.
No, listen, I love doing these podcasts with you. It was great fun. Looking forward to doing our year-end wrap, and happy Thanksgiving to you as well.
Thanks, Steve.